Hello, night wanderers, and welcome to Crowvane Manor, where old walls hold forgotten secrets and a calm voice guides you gently into sleep. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Leave your city, state, or country in the comments below. It's always wonderful to see how far the stories of Crowvane Manor travel. Just a quick note before we enter the darkness. You may hear a few short ads during the first 10 minutes. After that, the rest of the video will be completely ad-free. No more interruptions. Just you, the quiet night, and the stories waiting inside the manor. Now, settle into bed, close your eyes, and let the worries of the day slowly fade away. If you enjoy peaceful nights filled with mystery, please like the video, subscribe to Crowvane Manor, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. The doors are open. Come inside and let tonight's journey begin. Story 19. I know how stupid this sounds. I felt stupid even typing the title, and I already know what half the comments are going to say. Go to a doctor. Go to a psychiatrist. Stop taking whatever drugs you're taking. I understand. But please read the whole thing before deciding I've completely lost my mind, because I have video evidence another person has seen it. And apparently my uncle has known about these things for years. About a week ago, I started coughing up green material. Not mucus, not food, not anything I could identify. The first time it happened, I was standing over my bathroom sink brushing my teeth when I suddenly felt something caught at the back of my throat. I coughed. Something wet landed in the sink. At first, I assumed it was phlegm. Then, I looked closer. It was green, dark green in some places, almost yellow in others. It looked like shredded plant material mixed with tiny pieces of some transparent membrane. Curiosity beat common sense. I picked it up using a tissue and smelled it. That was a mistake. Imagine spinach left inside a sealed container for several months. Now mix that with wet soil, rotten fruit, and something sweet that has fermented far too long. That was the smell. I threw it into the toilet immediately. Before anyone says it, no, these were not tonsil stones. I know what tonsil stones look like. They also weren't pieces of food. I'm not stupid enough to forget everything I've eaten in a day. Actually, my diet lately makes that explanation almost impossible. I'm a model. Not famous, but famous enough that people occasionally recognize me in public and ask for photos. The biggest fashion show of my year is happening in 2 weeks. That means I've been controlling my weight very carefully. And by carefully, I mean terribly. For the past week, I've basically been living on 3 eggs, around a liter of iced coffee, water, and the occasional vitamin supplement. Before someone lectures me about nutrition, yes, I know, it's bad. I don't need a dietitian in the comments. I have a manager for that. The point is that there was absolutely no green food going into my body. No broccoli, no spinach, no green peppers, no peas, nothing. So unless eggs somehow transform into rotting leaves after sitting inside a human body, the green material couldn't have come from anything I remembered eating. At first, I thought I had some strange infection. Maybe fungus, maybe some rare stomach problem. Naturally, that should have meant going to a hospital. I didn't. I know how that sounds. But understand my situation. Hospitals are crowded. People carry phones. People take pictures of everything. If someone recognized me while I was sitting in an examination room and I suddenly coughed up a handful of green sludge, there was a very real possibility that a photograph would be online within an hour. Model coughs up mystery green substance. Secret health condition? Drug abuse? Eating disorder? Pregnant? Dying? You know how the internet works. A 5-second clip could cost me months of work. So I did what every responsible adult does when they're afraid to visit a doctor. I searched the internet. One explanation I found was sleepwalking. Apparently, extreme stress can cause people to do strange things while sleeping. Eating, walking, opening cabinets, even preparing food without remembering it afterward. That gave me an idea. Maybe I was eating something during the night. That would explain why I couldn't remember consuming anything green. So I bought a security camera. Nothing fancy. Just one of those small indoor cameras connected to an app. I placed it on my bookshelf where I could see my entire bed. I expected to catch myself getting up around 3 in the morning and eating something embarrassing. Maybe spooning pesto directly from the refrigerator. Maybe chewing houseplants. I almost hoped for that. Instead, I caught fairies, sprites, whatever the hell you want to call them. Apparently, my uncle gets angry when I call them sprites. So according to him, their proper classification is tooth fairy. Yes, tooth fairies. The first night of recording seemed normal. I went to bed around midnight. I slept. Nothing happened for maybe 2 hours. Then, at 2:17 a.m., something appeared beside my bed. Not entered. Appeared, there was a small flash. A quiet pop. And this cloud of sparkling dust exploded in the air. I watched the video 3 times. Because I couldn't understand what I was seeing. A tiny humanoid creature was hovering beside my bed, maybe 10 centimeters tall. It had arms, legs, a head, a mostly human shape. But 2 pairs of transparent wings moved behind its back. Its body was greenish-gray. Not cute. Not some beautiful little woman with butterfly wings. It looked awful. Thin limbs, large eyes, pointed little teeth. Its wings reminded me more of an insect than anything magical. The thing flew several circles around me. Then it landed on my pillow, beside my face. I watched it walk toward my mouth. It reached down with both hands. Then it started pulling on my lips. My sleeping body didn't react. The thing pulled my mouth open. Then it used both feet to push against my lower teeth. My jaw opened wider, and the fairy climbed inside. Head first, I wish I were joking, it literally dove into my mouth. The second its legs disappeared between my lips, my jaw snapped shut. Then I started chewing. Watching myself do that was one of the most disgusting things I've ever experienced. My jaw moved slowly. Crunch, pause, crunch. The camera microphone barely picked it up, but I could hear something. Tiny squealing sounds. Then another crunch. Then I swallowed. I stared at the recording. I think I stayed completely still for nearly a minute. Then I ran to the bathroom. I vomited. Hard, everything inside my stomach came out. Egg, coffee, water, bile, no fairy. Obviously, if I had swallowed it hours earlier, my stomach acid had probably already destroyed most of it. That thought didn't stop me. I kept vomiting until there was nothing left. Then I kept retching anyway. Eventually, shaking and sweating, I returned to my bedroom. The recording was still playing, and while I had been throwing up, another fairy had appeared. Same flash, same glitter. It flew around my bed, landed near my mouth, pulled my lips open, then climbed inside. My sleeping self ate that one too. I nearly vomited again. Once I calmed down enough to think, I needed confirmation. Maybe the video was corrupted. Maybe I had somehow edited it. Maybe I really was hallucinating. So I sent the recording to my uncle. He's a dentist, not some random guy who claims to understand teeth because he watched a YouTube video. A real, respected dentist with his own clinic. I expected him to reply something like, "What the hell is that?" Instead, he answered almost immediately. Ah, looks like they finally noticed. I stared at the message. "What?" He replied, "What do you mean, what?" How are you not surprised that there are tiny flying people crawling into my mouth? There was a pause. Then, first, their official classification is tooth fairy. Second, I'm not surprised because they visit the association every few years to renew their partnership agreement. I read that several times. What association? The Dental Association. I thought he was joking. What does the Dental Association have to do with fairies? Where did you think all those extracted teeth go? I called him immediately. Are you serious? Yes, you're telling me dentists work with tooth fairies? Technically, the professional associations work with them. Individual dentists mostly don't. This is insane. Not really. Tiny winged creatures are entering my mouth while I sleep. That part is unfortunate. Unfortunate? He laughed. I almost hung up. Then something from my childhood suddenly came back to me. My parents worked constantly when I was young, even weekends. That meant I spent a lot of Saturdays and Sundays at my uncle's dental clinic. He had a small storage room filled with old plaster molds and discarded dental models. When I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, I loved playing with them. I had invented a game called Hunting for Pearls. The pearls were plaster teeth. I would sit on the floor and carefully break individual fake teeth from old casts. Sometimes I spent hours doing it. If that had been the only thing I did, none of this would be happening. Unfortunately, my uncle taught me something. A trick. A way for a kid to make money. Fake teeth could fool the tooth fairy, according to him. If you put a plaster tooth inside your mouth for around 15 minutes, your saliva coated it enough that a low-ranking tooth fairy could mistake it for a recently lost human tooth. Then, you put the fake tooth under your pillow. Go to sleep. Fairy appears. Fairy takes fake tooth. Fairy leaves money. At 8 years old, this sounded like the greatest financial opportunity in human history. I asked my uncle about it. He groaned. I told you that only works safely after you've finished losing your baby teeth. I was 8. Exactly. You taught an 8-year-old how to commit fairy fraud. I assumed you would wait. For 6 years? Yes. What 8-year-old waits 6 years for free money? Apparently, there was an important rule he had failed to explain clearly enough. If someone had already finished losing all their baby teeth, fooling a tooth fairy with a fake tooth was considered an operational mistake on the fairy's side. The creature failed to verify age. Not your problem. But if you did it while you were still actively losing baby teeth, things became different. The lower-level tooth fairies apparently had extremely poor administrative systems. They would accept the false tooth, pay you, record the transaction, then continue processing your normal baby teeth as they fell out. They wouldn't realize the numbers didn't match until years later. 16 years later, in my case, when they finally completed whatever ridiculous cross-species audit they used. They discovered that I had been overpaid for teeth that never existed. Then, debt collection started. Except fairies don't want their money back. They want the teeth. My teeth. Every night. Until the balance is corrected. I remembered being 8. Sitting inside my uncle's storage room. Plaster dust beneath my fingernails. Fake teeth everywhere. I had done it constantly. Every weekend, practically, I couldn't remember the exact number. Maybe 30. Maybe 50. Maybe more. I used the money on candy, ice cream, toys, game cartridges, anything a child wanted. At the time, I never actually believed fairies were real. I assumed my parents and uncle were secretly placing money under my pillow. Apparently not. My uncle found the whole situation hilarious. "Oh dear," he said, "we have a financial criminal in the family." Shut up. A cross-species financial criminal. I was 8. That defense may not work in fairy court. There is a fairy court? I don't know. Probably I wanted to strangle him through the phone. Still, there seemed to be an obvious solution. My uncle knew about them. Dentists worked with them. Surely he could call someone. Okay, fine. You people have agreements with them. Fix it. No. What? Can't. Why? It's complicated. You work with them. Again, dentists don't directly work with the tooth collection class. The what? The collection class. Apparently, tooth fairies have a social hierarchy. Of course they do. Why wouldn't they? The fairies who negotiate with human dental associations belong to something my uncle described as the managerial class. They're intelligent. They speak human languages. They understand contracts. They negotiate prices. They travel internationally. They apparently wear clothes. The creatures entering children's bedrooms are different. They're worker caste. Bottom level. Apparently extremely stupid. My uncle's exact words were dumb as bricks. They can't be reasoned with? No, they understand teeth. Barely they understand debt. Very well. Fantastic. I asked him to contact management. Tell them my debt is settled. Can't. Why? Management isn't available. What do you mean they aren't available? They're on vacation. All of them? Pretty much. For how long? Most of the year. I stared at my phone. So the workers are collecting teeth every night while management spends the year on vacation? Terrible corporate culture. I hated him. When is the next agreement meeting? Hold on. I could hear papers moving. Let's see, a pause. Then, next year. He added a smiling emoji. I blocked him for 15 minutes, then unblocked him because unfortunately he was still my best source of information. That was several days ago. Things have gotten worse, much worse. At first, there was one tooth fairy per night, then two, then three. Last night, judging by the wings and body fragments I coughed up this morning, there were at least 8. 8? Apparently they keep calling for backup. I tried sleeping with my mouth closed. Did nothing. I tried wearing a surgical mask. They crawled underneath it. I tried an N95. They cut through it. I tried taping my lips shut. That was the worst idea. The security footage showed 3 fairies examining the tape. Then, one disappeared. A few seconds later, 12 showed up. They worked together. They peeled the tape away. 2 held my lips open. The others climbed inside. 1 apparently got impatient and tried entering through my nose. I woke the next morning with blood under both nostrils. The biggest problem isn't even the horror anymore. It's calories. I know. That sounds insane. Tiny fairy creatures are climbing into my mouth every night, and I'm worried about calories. But remember what I do for a living. I have a major fashion show coming up. I have eaten almost nothing all week. 3 eggs, coffee, vitamins, that's it. And somehow I've gained 8 pounds. 8 pounds. In 1 week. Do you understand what that means for someone in my job? My manager has already called twice asking what is happening. I told her water retention. She told me my face looks fuller too. Apparently, tooth fairies have an extremely high caloric density. Maybe it's the wings. Maybe fairy meat is 90% fat. I don't know. I don't want to know. I just know that if 8 fairies make me gain 8 pounds, and the number keeps increasing, I'm going to walk into Fashion Week, shaped like a refrigerator, assuming I don't choke first. That's the other concern. The creatures are becoming larger. The first one was maybe 10 centimeters. Last night's biggest one looked closer to 15. And according to the footage, they are getting more aggressive. They don't patiently open my mouth anymore. They fight. Push, claw, one fairy stabbed another in the neck trying to reach my teeth first. My sleeping self ate both. I called my uncle again. Why am I eating them? He went quiet. What? They're trying to take my teeth. Why am I eating them? I don't know. You know everything else, not everything. Is this normal? No. That was the first answer he had given me that genuinely frightened me. What does that mean? I've never heard of someone eating tooth fairies before. They're climbing into my mouth. Yes, so obviously I'm going to swallow some. They usually don't go inside. I stopped. What? He explained that normal debt collection involved fairies entering the bedroom and physically removing teeth. They didn't crawl into mouths. They should be trying to pull them from outside. I thought about the videos. They're deliberately climbing in. That shouldn't happen. Then why? My uncle stayed silent. Then asked, how many fake teeth did you use? I don't remember. Try. Dozens? How many dozens? I don't know. Maybe 50? Silence, Uncle? That's a lot. What happens if the debt is too high? I don't know. His voice had changed. He wasn't joking anymore. That frightened me more than anything. He told me he'd contact several colleagues. He called back 2 hours later. Apparently, one elderly dentist remembered something similar happening in the 1980s. A child had tricked the tooth fairies repeatedly. When the debt was discovered years later, collection escalated. The fairies eventually stopped taking teeth. What did they take? My uncle hesitated. The whole mouth. I almost dropped my phone. What does that mean? The person survived. That doesn't answer my question. He didn't have a mouth anymore. I sat completely still. Like his lips were removed? No, what about his jaw? Gone? How can someone live without a jaw? Fairy biology. That isn't an answer. I know. Apparently the man's face had healed over completely. Smooth skin from nose to chin. No opening. No teeth. No tongue. Nothing. He spent the rest of his life being fed through a tube. I checked my reflection immediately. My mouth still existed. For now. Then my uncle said something worse. The fairies didn't crawl inside his mouth. Then why are mine doing it? I really don't know. I started examining the green material more carefully. I hate myself for this. I put on gloves, used tweezers. Under bright light, I separated the pieces. Wings, tiny bones, green tissue, transparent membrane. Then I found something hard. White, a tooth. Not mine, too small. Smaller than a grain of rice. A fairy tooth. Then another. Then another. I had been eating the collectors, the workers sent to collect my debt. And suddenly I realized what that probably meant. If I owed them teeth before, what did I owe after killing dozens of their employees? My uncle stopped answering my calls. Not because he's angry. Because apparently the Dental Association issued some kind of warning. He finally texted me, do not come to the clinic. They know you're E related to ME. Then management has been contacted early. I replied, I thought they were on vacation. His answer, they were. About an hour ago, someone knocked on my apartment door. Not a fairy. The knock was human. 3 slow taps. I checked the camera outside. There was a woman standing in the hallway. At least, I think she was a woman. Very tall, extremely thin, green suit, perfect white gloves. Her hair was silver. Behind her floated maybe 50 tiny tooth fairies, not flying randomly. Organized, rows like employees standing behind their boss. The woman looked directly into the doorbell camera, then smiled. Her teeth were tiny, hundreds of them. She raised the clipboard. On the top was my name. Underneath, outstanding balance. I haven't opened the door. She has been standing there for nearly an hour. Every few minutes, she knocks. 3 times. Very polite. Then she waits. The small fairies aren't trying to enter. They're terrified of her. I can tell. They won't even look directly at her. So I'm assuming management finally came back from vacation. Great. I suppose that should be good news. Maybe I can negotiate. Maybe I can repay whatever stupid amount 8-year-old me stole. I have money. Real money. I'll give them everything. I don't care. But 20 minutes ago, the woman slipped a piece of paper underneath my door. It's a bill. Not for coins. Not even for teeth. Apparently, the fake teeth I used as a child aren't the main problem anymore. There's a section labeled Unauthorized Consumption of Registered Collection Personnel. Under that, number of employees consumed, 37. 37. I had no idea it had been that many. Then, replacement value PER employee, 32 adult human teeth. I did the math. 1,184 teeth. I only have 32. Underneath that is another line, alternative asset collection available. I don't like the word asset. And beneath that, one complete human skeleton equivalent to 206 registered bones. Apparently, that still doesn't cover the debt. There's another option, biological service contract. Term, 16 years. I don't know what that means. But at the bottom of the paper, there's a place for a signature. And someone has already signed my name. Not my handwriting. A tiny green handprint is stamped beside it. The woman knocked again while I was writing this. Then she spoke for the first time. Her voice was beautiful, calm, professional. Good evening. I didn't answer. We represent the Central Tooth Acquisition Authority. Of course, they have a government-sounding name. We understand that several administrative errors occurred during your childhood. I almost laughed. Administrative errors. We are willing to forgive the original fraudulent claims. That sounded promising. Then, however, the consumption of 37 licensed collectors requires restitution. I shouted through the door. They crawled into my mouth. There was a pause. Then she answered, yes. Something about the way she said it made me stop. You sent them inside? Yes. Why? Another pause. Evidence collection. I didn't understand. What evidence? She didn't answer immediately. Then, to confirm hereditary feeding behavior. I felt cold. Hereditary what? The fairies outside started making tiny noises. Not talking. Whispering. The woman said, please ask your uncle about your mother. My mother died when I was 5. My uncle almost never talks about her. I called him. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing, then I sent, what happened to Mom? His reply came almost immediately. I'm sorry. That was it. I called again. This time he answered. What happened to her? Silence. Tell me. She wasn't sick. I stopped breathing. My entire childhood, I had been told my mother died from complications related to an autoimmune condition. What was she? Another silence. Then, your father met her through the association. What? She was management. I almost dropped the phone. No, she left. Left what? The tooth fairies. My uncle's voice was shaking. She wanted a human life. Your father helped. I looked at the woman outside through the camera. Green suit, silver hair, perfect gloves. Then I remembered old photographs of my mother. Her hair had been dark. But her face, I couldn't stop thinking about her teeth. She never smiled with her mouth open in photographs. My uncle continued. They don't allow management to resign. What happened? They found her. I didn't say anything. She protected you. My stomach turned. What do you mean? You weren't fully human when you were born. I sat down. That doesn't make sense. Your teeth. What about them? You had too many. I suddenly remembered years of childhood dental procedures, extractions, appointments, my uncle constantly examining my mouth, my parents telling me I had an unusual condition. How many? 76. I couldn't speak. We removed the extras slowly. Why? To make you look normal. Outside my apartment, the woman knocked again. My uncle whispered, don't sign anything. I think they already signed for me. Then don't open the door. What happens if I don't? I don't know. You people never know anything. He started crying. I've never heard my uncle cry. Then he said, your mother could eat them too. Everything became very quiet. What? The workers. He swallowed. When she was young, before management promoted her, she consumed collectors. I looked toward the bathroom, at the green remains still sitting inside a sealed container on the counter. My uncle continued, you aren't eating them because they enter your mouth. My stomach tightened. They enter your mouth because you're eating them. No, you call them. No, you just don't remember. I turned toward the bedroom camera. I opened last night's recording again. I skipped backward, 1 hour before the first ferry arrived. There I was, sleeping, then my eyes opened. I sat upright. My movements were wrong, too smooth. I turned toward the camera and smiled. My teeth looked normal. Then my jaw opened. Wider, wider, far wider than it should. My mouth became a dark hole, and from somewhere inside my throat came a sound. A tiny bell. Once, twice, 3 times. The first tooth fairy appeared immediately. It didn't look like it wanted to come closer. It fought against the air. Its wings beat backward. But something dragged it toward me. It grabbed the bedsheet. Its tiny fingers slipped. It screamed. Then it was pulled into my mouth. I ate it. Another appeared. Then another. I stopped the video. I think I'm going to be sick. The woman outside just knocked again. This time, I answered. What do you want? Her voice came through the door. What belongs to us? My teeth? No. Then what? She laughed softly. The tiny fairies behind her immediately became silent. You, I stepped away from the door. She continued, your mother stole company property. What property? You, apparently I wasn't born because 2 people fell in love. At least, not entirely. My mother left something before escaping. An egg, or whatever tooth fairies use instead. My father helped her turn it into something human. Me, that is why I've always had strangely strong teeth. That is why I had so many as a child. That is why I never get cavities. That is why my calorie intake never seemed to affect my weight the same way as other models until this week. And that is why I've been gaining weight from eating fairies. I'm not digesting them. I'm growing. I checked my height 10 minutes ago. I am almost 2 centimeters taller than I was last month. My shoulder blades hurt. There are 2 hard bumps beneath the skin. Actually, 4. The woman says I have 2 choices. Go with her willingly. Return to management training, whatever that means. Or refuse. If I refuse, the collection workers will continue coming every night. Not to collect my teeth, to feed me. Until whatever part of me my mother suppressed finishes developing. Then they'll collect me anyway. I asked how long that would take. She looked at the clipboard. Approximately 13 days. The fashion show is in 12. Of course. My manager is going to kill me before the fairies do. Sorry, that joke wasn't funny. I keep joking because otherwise I'm going to panic. The woman is still outside. She says I can take until sunrise to decide. I asked whether my uncle could help. She laughed. Then she told me something interesting. The Dental Association's partnership isn't for disposing of extracted teeth. The fairies don't need human teeth as raw material. They need them as currency. Every extracted tooth dentist's turnover buys protection. Protection for what? Apparently from things like me. Half-human children of defected tooth fairy management. We're rare, but when we mature, we become predators of worker-class fairies. My mother's side of the species. The whole fake tooth scam didn't cause this. It only caused enough attention for them to find me. 16 years late. The green stuff I've been coughing up isn't simply fairy remains either. Some of that transparent membrane is mine. Apparently, my digestive system is changing. My uncle says If I start coughing up anything that looks like a transparent sac, I need to call him immediately. I asked why. He refused to answer. So obviously I searched my bathroom trash. I found one. A small, clear membrane, about the size of my palm. Inside it were 3 tiny white objects. At first I thought they were fairy bones. They're teeth, human-sized, perfectly formed, adult molars. I'm growing replacement teeth somewhere inside my body. I don't know where. My mouth still has 32. I checked. Twice, there are no new ones coming through my gums. The woman outside says that's normal. Apparently, they don't grow in the mouth. Not initially. I did not ask where they grow. I don't want to know. So that's where things stand. I am sitting inside my apartment. There are around 50 tiny tooth fairies outside with what I assume is some executive-level nightmare from their management cast. My uncle has admitted that my dead mother was apparently not human. My body is producing teeth in places where teeth should not exist. I have consumed 37 licensed magical employees. I owe over 1,000 teeth. I'm 8 pounds over my target weight. And I have 12 days until the biggest fashion show of my career. If anyone reading this is a witch, wizard, occult researcher, psychic, dentist with better connections than my useless uncle, retired tooth fairy executive, labor lawyer specializing in supernatural employment law, or literally anyone who knows what I should do, please tell me. And before anyone suggests opening the door and negotiating peacefully, there is one final problem. A few minutes ago, I asked the woman outside whether she knew my mother. She went completely still. Then she removed one of her white gloves. Her fingers were long, green, too many joints. On one finger was a gold ring. I recognize that ring. I have seen it in every photograph of my mother. I asked, "Where did you get that?" The woman raised her hand toward the camera. Then she slowly removed her silver wig. Black hair fell around her shoulders. I stopped breathing. She reached toward her face, found an invisible seam near her jaw, and started peeling. The face came away like a mask. Underneath was my mother's face, exactly as I remember her. She smiled, and when she opened her mouth, there were hundreds of tiny teeth inside. "Sweetheart," she said, "I've been waiting 16 years for you to finish growing." Then the 4 hard bumps beneath my shoulder blades moved, and something inside my back started beating its wings. My name is Toby. I don't know if anyone is actually going to read this. I don't even know whether this message will leave the room I'm sitting in. I pressed send because there was nothing else I could do, and because if there is even a small chance that my phone connects to something for a few seconds, maybe this will reach someone. I think I'm underground. There are no windows here, no clocks except the one on my phone, no way to tell how deep I am, and there are things outside the only door I can use. Before Friday night, I was probably the most boring person in this city. I worked, I came home, I ate cheap food, I watched television until I fell asleep. Then I woke up and did it again. Nothing about my life was interesting enough to tell strangers online. Friday was supposed to be exactly the same. I worked the late shift until 10 p.m. It had been a long day, and by the time I left, all I wanted was to get home, put a frozen pizza in the oven, and forget that other human beings existed for a few hours. I reached my apartment at 10:40. Everything was normal. That is the last time I can say that with complete confidence. I changed clothes, turned on the television, put the pizza into the oven. I remember checking the time because I was annoyed that I would have to wait 20 minutes for it to cook. At 11:04 p.m., my phone screamed. If you have ever received one of those emergency alerts, you know the sound I mean. That awful siren that suddenly blasts through the speaker at full volume. It doesn't matter whether you know it's coming. Your entire body reacts. I nearly dropped the phone. A red warning banner filled the screen. Underneath it was a message. Official emergency alert. A curfew is now in effect throughout the city. Return to your home immediately. Close all doors and windows. Do not leave the building under any circumstances. Stay away from windows. Further information will follow. That was it. No explanation. No reason. Nothing telling us what the emergency actually was. I read the message 3 times. Usually, an emergency alert tells you what happened. Flood, fire, storm, chemical leak. Active shooter. Something, this one only told us what not to do. And one sentence bothered me more than the others. Stay away from windows. If there is dangerous gas outside, you close the windows. If there is a riot, maybe you avoid the streets. If there is some kind of attack, you stay indoors. But why specifically stay away from windows? What were they expecting us to see? Or what were they afraid might see us? I wish I had taken that warning more seriously. A few moments after the alert, I heard a door open somewhere in the stairwell. Then a man started talking loudly on his phone. Someone else shouted from another floor. Outside, a car horn sounded repeatedly. Within minutes, the entire building seemed restless. People were coming out of their apartments to ask one another what was happening. I checked social media. Nobody knew anything. There were hundreds of posts from people across the city showing the same alert. Some thought it was a mistake. Others were already inventing theories. Terrorist attack, military exercise, chemical spill, prison escape, something falling from space. Nobody had actual information. Then, at exactly 11:11 p.m., the internet disappeared. 1 second my phone was loading posts. The next, nothing. No Wi-Fi. No mobile data. I tried the landline I almost never used. Dead, that was when I started getting scared. I opened my apartment door. Albert, my elderly neighbor, stood in the hallway wearing a white t-shirt and underwear. He was trying to light a cigarette while talking to the woman who lived downstairs. Neither of them knew anything. Albert said emergency services were probably overloaded. The woman downstairs thought the electricity would be cut next. That made me think about food. There is a small grocery store, maybe 200 meters from our building. It takes less than 2 minutes to reach it, if you walk quickly. My freezer had 1 pizza, a few old bags of vegetables, maybe some bread. I had no idea whether this curfew would last 1 night or several days. I know what you're thinking. The alert literally said not to leave. I know. I knew then, too. But the store was right there, practically within sight of my building. I told myself I would run there, buy bottled water and food, and be back inside before anything happened. It was one of those decisions that seems reasonable only until the second you make it. Then you realize how stupid you are. I went downstairs. Mr. Wessel lived on the 2nd floor. He was around 80, maybe older. He had a little dog that seemed almost as old as he was. Every night at around 11:30, he took the dog outside. He liked walking late because the street was quieter and his dog was nervous around traffic. When I stepped through the main entrance, I saw him. At first, I only noticed his legs. He was lying partly on the sidewalk and partly against the curb. His dog was nowhere around. Then I saw something crouched over him. My brain tried to identify it as a person. It wasn't. It had long arms. Too long. Its back curved upward in a smooth arch, almost like an animal bending over prey. I couldn't see its face. It was moving slightly, not attacking him. Feeding, That was the feeling I got immediately. I don't remember deciding to run. One moment I was outside. The next, I was charging upstairs. I must have skipped steps because I nearly fell twice. I heard something behind me. Maybe the building door. Maybe footsteps. Maybe nothing. I reached my floor, grabbed the first familiar handle, threw open the door, ran inside, slammed it behind me. Then I stopped. This wasn't my apartment. At first, I genuinely thought I had entered the wrong door. That would have been embarrassing, but normal. I turned around. The hallway was yellow. Not painted yellow, exactly. The walls were covered in old yellow wallpaper. The pattern was almost impossible to focus on. Small shapes repeated over and over. But every time I tried to understand what the pattern actually was, it seemed slightly different. The carpet beneath my feet was damp. The air smelled like dust, old paper, and something faintly sweet. There was no furniture, no windows, just the hallway. Behind me was the door I had used, my door. Same handle, same color, same scratches near the bottom. I opened it immediately. The stairwell was gone. Beyond the doorway was another yellow room. Same wallpaper, same wet carpet, same strange humming noise I hadn't noticed until that moment. I slammed the door shut, opened it again, still yellow. I think I sat on the floor for several minutes, my back pressed against the wall. I kept thinking one thing. I finally lost my mind. That had to be it. Maybe I was still standing outside. Maybe whatever creature I saw over Mr. Wessel had attacked me. Maybe I was unconscious. Maybe this was a hallucination caused by fear. I pinched my arm. Hard, then harder. I have bruises now. Nothing changed. I slapped myself. Still there. Then I heard something. Far down one of the hallways. A growl. Low, slow. It didn't sound human. It didn't come closer. That almost made it worse. Something was there, waiting. I got up. My legs were shaking badly. I opened the door into the next yellow room and stepped through. Then I closed it as quietly as possible. I started walking. I had no idea where I was going. Every hallway looked almost identical. Turn left. Yellow walls. Turn right. Yellow walls. Another room. Another corridor. Some passages were wide, others narrow. Sometimes the ceiling seemed higher, sometimes lower, but nothing gave me any sense of direction. The hum followed me everywhere. That sound, a constant electrical buzzing coming from the ceiling lights. Eventually, I started understanding why a place like that could destroy someone mentally. There was no progress. You walked and never arrived anywhere. Sometimes I thought I recognized a corner. Then I realized I couldn't be certain. My legs started hurting. My mouth was dry. I hadn't brought water. I hadn't brought food. I had left my wallet at home. I had only my phone. No signal. No internet. Battery slowly dropping. At one point I stopped and started crying. Not loudly. I just couldn't hold it in anymore. The walls seemed closer. The air felt thinner. I started thinking about Mr. Wessel. Was he actually dead? Had I really seen something eating him? Was the city still there? Was any of this real? I kept walking because standing still felt worse. Then I turned a corner. The walls were white. I almost laughed from relief. Just seeing another color felt like escaping prison. The yellow wallpaper ended abruptly. The floor changed, too. Gray tile. The air smelled different. Disinfectant. Metal. Something medical. Like a hospital. I followed the corridor quickly. There were doors along both sides, but most were locked. Some had small windows covered with grime. Then I turned another corner. At the far end was a door partly open. A fire extinguisher lay across the threshold. Someone had deliberately placed it there so the door couldn't close. I approached slowly. I expected another creature. Instead, I found a laboratory. Small, old, most of the equipment looked decades out of date. Metal counters, glass cabinets, a sink, several machines I didn't recognize. Then I saw the man beneath the sink. At first, I thought he was a medical model, a fake skeleton or preserved body used for training. He was wearing a laboratory coat, or what remained of one. The fabric had turned brownish yellow with age. His body looked almost weightless inside it. He had dried out completely, not rotted. Dried, his skin was dark brown and stretched tightly over his bones. His lips had pulled back enough to expose all his teeth. His eyes were collapsed inward. His hands rested peacefully in his lap. He looked like he had simply sat down one day and never moved again. I almost ran. Then I noticed another room beyond the laboratory. That was where I found the door. Calling it a door isn't really correct. It was more like a wall that happened to open. Steel floor to ceiling, at least 5 meters wide. There was one narrow seam down the middle. Beside it was a card reader. A tiny red light glowed above the reader. I had no idea what was behind it, but anything that looked deliberately constructed seemed better than wandering through endless yellow corridors. The scientist had to have access. I hated touching him. His body was so dry that I was afraid pieces would break off. But around his neck was a cord. Attached to it was a white access card. Black stripe, golden chip. I took it. Then I returned to the steel wall, held the card against the reader. The red light turned green. Something huge unlocked behind the wall. Clunk, then the two halves separated. Slowly, the sound echoed through the laboratory. I waited. Nothing came through. So I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. That was a mistake. Or maybe it saved my life. I still don't know. The room I entered is enormous, bigger than a normal laboratory, maybe the size of a school gym. There are cabinets along every wall. Most contain equipment I don't understand. Coils, meters, gas masks, protective suits, boxes marked with numbers instead of words. At the center of the room stands a large metal ring, roughly 3 meters tall. It consists of separate metal sections connected together. Inside the ring is something that looks like black glass, except sometimes I think it moves, not visibly, more like my eyes refuse to focus on it. Beside the steel entrance was a table. A folder had been left there. I opened it. Most of the information means nothing to me. Charts, tables, measurements, abbreviations, several columns appear repeatedly. Level, residual emission. Duration of stay. Return, most entries under level say either 0 or 1. Almost every entry under return says no. 3 say yes. 2 of those have handwritten notes. Condition, see Appendix C. Appendix C isn't here. I searched every page. Nothing. Then I found a section I could understand. The term backrooms is to be avoided in all official documentation. The technically correct designation is interface. Backrooms, I had heard that word before. Internet stories. People talking about endless yellow rooms. I always thought it was fictional. Some joke that became horror stories online. Apparently, someone here studied it. Or created it. I kept reading. Most of the language became technical again. Spatial displacement, residual fields, entry fractures, frequency stability. I don't understand any of it. Then I found one page with a warning printed by itself. Class 3 does not respond to light. Class 3 has no functioning visual organs. Class 3 orients itself using acoustic AND electromagnetic emissions. Along the margin, someone had handwritten, they follow the static. 2 initials underneath, I don't know whose. That sentence bothered me. They follow the static, my phone. Radio waves? Wi-Fi? Electrical systems? I didn't know. Then I found the only other exit, a normal gray security door, card reader. Small rectangular window made from reinforced glass with wire inside it. I approached quietly. I pressed my face near the window. White corridor. For 1 second, I felt relieved. Then I noticed the blood. It covered the walls, not a little. Smears, handprints, long trails across the floor. Something had happened out there. Then, one of the creatures walked past. I ducked instinctively. I only saw it for maybe 2 seconds. That was enough. Its arms almost reached the floor. Its body was narrow. No eyes, no visible ears. Its head looked stretched forward. The skin was gray and wet-looking. Another one moved behind it. Then another. At least 3, maybe more. They made almost no sound. I backed away from the door. I tried the steel entrance again. The access card doesn't work anymore. Red light. Nothing. I am trapped. That is where I was when I started writing this. But things have changed while I've been typing. First, I turned off my phone's Wi-Fi and mobile data. There wasn't a signal anyway. Then I remembered the note. They follow the static. I switched the phone to airplane mode. The creatures outside stopped moving. I know that sounds impossible, but I had been hearing faint scratches and footsteps through the gray door. The moment airplane mode activated, silence. I stood there for almost a minute. Then I turned airplane mode off. Something hit the door. Hard bang, I turned it back on. Silence, so apparently the note was literal. They can detect electromagnetic signals. That means sending this message might be the stupidest thing I can do. But if I leave airplane mode on, nobody will ever receive it. I started searching the room more carefully. I found several emergency kits. Food bars, water, medical supplies, and a handheld device that looks like some kind of field meter. There are instructions taped to it. Most are faded, but one line is readable. Do not activate within occupied interface zones. Excellent. Very helpful. I also found another document behind one of the cabinets. Not Appendix C, but close. Appendix B. Most of it describes return events. Apparently, people who entered the interface sometimes came back. Not always to the same location. Not always after the same amount of time. And not always completely. One sentence says, return integrity decreases sharply after prolonged exposure. Another says, subjects should not respond to familiar voices encountered beyond level 0. That reminded me of something. A few minutes ago, while I was searching the room, I heard someone outside the door. A human voice. Very faint. Toby? I froze. It sounded like Albert, my neighbor. Toby, open the door. I moved toward it, then stopped. How would Albert be here? I said nothing. The voice came again. Come on, kid, I know you're in there. Albert calls me kid sometimes. He is one of the few people who does. I almost answered. Then another voice joined him. Mr. Wessel, the old man I saw outside. Toby, my stomach turned. He should be dead. Or whatever happened to him. Then something scratched slowly across the reinforced window. I backed away. Mr. Wessel's voice whispered, please let us in. I didn't. Eventually the voices stopped. Now I understand why the emergency alert told us to stay away from windows. Maybe these things don't only hunt sound. Maybe they copy people. Or maybe there are different classes. I went back to the folder. Near the bottom, I found a page I somehow missed. Emergency Civilian Containment Procedure. The first lines match the alert. Initiate citywide curfew. Residents must remain indoors. Windows must be closed. All civilians must avoid direct visual exposure through external glass. Terminate public network access no later than 7 minutes following warning. 7 minutes. The alert came at 11:04. The internet died at 11:11, exactly 7 minutes. This wasn't some unexpected disaster. They had a procedure. They knew this could happen. The document continues. Level 0 bleed-through events may result in temporary architectural replacement. Affected doors may become transitional surfaces. Do not cross a door after external contact has occurred. That's what happened to me. I saw the creature outside. Then I ran through my apartment door. Except the door wasn't leading to my apartment anymore. It had become an entrance into this place. There's another paragraph. This one explains the windows. Visual contact with Class 2 entities may create anchor recognition. Once recognition occurs, the entity may continue tracking the observer across transitional boundaries. So if I had looked out my apartment window after the alert, I don't know. Maybe something would have followed me. Maybe that's what happened to Mr. Wessel, I kept reading. Class 3 entities respond primarily to active electromagnetic fields and repetitive acoustic signatures. Mobile devices should be powered down, not silent, not airplane mode. Powered down. My phone is currently on. That means even airplane mode might not be enough. And I have been typing for almost an hour. I look toward the gray door. There are shadows behind the little window now. Several, they're standing there, not moving. I think they know I'm inside. I found another button on the wall near the ring. It says, Return Sequence. There are 3 lights beside it. Red, yellow, green, only red is currently lit. I searched the documents again. The ring in the center of the room is apparently some kind of controlled interface gateway. At least, I think so. There are references to artificial return apertures. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it can send me back. But I don't know how to activate it. I found instructions on the underside of the table. Someone had written them by hand. Cut all transmission. Wait for residual emission below 0. 4 MVM. Activate return sequence. Do not enter if the surface shows your current location. Do not enter if someone you know is waiting on the other side. If the aperture shows your home empty, count the doors. There must be one. I don't understand the last part. Count the doors. There must be one. My apartment has several doors. Front door. Bedroom. Bathroom. Closet. Maybe they mean in the image? I don't know. Something just tapped on the gray door. 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Then my mother called my name. She died 11 years ago. I haven't heard her voice since I was 17. But it is perfect. Toby, I started crying immediately. I hate that. I know it isn't her. I know. But hearing your dead mother say your name from 10 meters away does something to your brain that logic can't control. Toby, sweetheart. I covered my ears. The voice continued. You don't have to be scared. There is movement behind the reinforced glass. I refused to look. I found another note. It was taped beneath the return control panel. If familiar voices begin before return sequence, do not look through any window. Anchor contamination likely. That means the things outside may already have connected themselves to me. I need to leave. I think the ring is my only chance. I'm going to shut my phone off soon. Before I do, I am going to press send again. If you receive this, maybe someone can warn people. The emergency alert is not a mistake. If your city ever gets one telling you to stay inside and avoid windows, listen, do not go outside. Do not look through the glass. And if you open a familiar door and there is somewhere unfamiliar behind it, do not immediately go back through. Apparently that makes things worse. I just checked the field meter. Noun 9. It needs to drop below 0.4. My phone is probably part of the problem, so I have to stop transmitting. Wait, something changed. The green light beside the ring just flickered. Once, The black surface inside the metal frame is no longer black. It looks like my apartment, my living room. I can see the television. The frozen pizza is still sitting in front of the oven. The clock on the wall says 11:04. That cannot be right. Hours have passed, maybe more. There is one door visible in the image. My front door. One, the instructions said there must be one. This might be it. But something is wrong. There is someone sitting on my couch. Their back is facing me. I can only see their hair. Dark, short, same as mine. Same shirt I was wearing Friday. Same body. Me, there is another Toby sitting inside my apartment. The handwritten instructions said, "Do not enter if someone you know is waiting on the other side." Does myself count? I think it does. The figure on the couch just moved. It slowly turned its head toward the ring. Not its body, only its head. Too far. I saw part of its face. There are no eyes. It smiled. The ring went black again. The green light died. My mother's voice outside started laughing. Not loudly, almost affectionately. Then she said, "Wrong door." The field meter is dropping now. Nofen 7. Nofen 6. I haven't changed anything. Nofen 5. Something is turning devices off around me. The lights in the cabinets just died. The ceiling lights are flickering. Nofen 4. The return light turned yellow. I think I need to power down my phone now. But before I do, I need to write one final thing. I found Appendix C. It was inside the dried scientist's coat. I had taken the access card, but somehow missed the folded pages behind it. The 3 successful return cases weren't really successful. The condition written beside them wasn't medical. It was identity verification. All 3 people returned, but only 2 were accepted as the same person who entered. The 3rd subject passed every physical test. Same fingerprints, same DNA, same memories, same scars. But his family insisted something was wrong. He knew things he shouldn't know. He stood outside windows at night. He stopped sleeping. And every electronic device near him produced static. The report says they terminated him. The final line of Appendix C is handwritten. If 2 versions return, kill the one that remembers the interface. I remember. The thing in my apartment probably doesn't. Maybe that's why it wants me to go back. Maybe the city doesn't only close the park, streets, or buildings during an event like this. Maybe the curfew isn't protecting us from things coming in. Maybe it's stopping people like me from coming back. The ring is green now. The black surface has changed again. I can see my building hallway. Empty. 1 door. Mine, no duplicate. No mother. No creatures. It looks safe, which probably means it isn't. Behind me, the steel security door just bent inward. Once, a huge dent appeared in the center. The Class 3 things are getting through. The field meter dropped to .2. My phone battery says 12%. I have 2 choices. Stay here until those things break through, or enter the ring and hope the version of my apartment waiting on the other side is real. The gray door bent again. The window cracked. Something is pushing its fingers through the wire mesh. Long gray fingers. No nails. Too many joints. My mother is still speaking, but now her voice is coming from inside the room. Toby. I look toward the cabinets. Nothing. Toby. Closer. I think one of them is already in here. I'm going through the ring. If this posts and I never update, assume I didn't make it. And if I do update later saying everything was fine, I need you to remember something for me. Ask me what I saw outside the grocery store. Ask me what happened to Mr. Wessel. Ask me what the yellow walls smelled like. Ask me about the dried scientist. Ask me about Appendix C. Because if I come back and I don't remember any of that, that isn't me. The following night, I went to bed hoping everything would be normal again. I tried not to think about what had happened the night before. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation for it. Maybe I had been half asleep. Maybe my mind had taken something ordinary in the darkness and turned it into something terrifying. Those explanations sounded convincing enough during the day. At night, they didn't help at all. I woke up sometime around 1:50 in the morning. The first thing I noticed was the nausea. It hit me so suddenly that I almost sat straight up. My stomach twisted, and for a few seconds I thought I was going to throw up all over the bed. I swallowed hard, but that only made things worse. It felt like I had swallowed my own tongue. There was pressure at the back of my throat, as if something thick and swollen had become lodged there. I kept gagging, trying to clear whatever was blocking my airway, but there was nothing to cough up. I could breathe, barely, but every breath made me more aware of the feeling. I grabbed my throat and forced myself to swallow again. That was when I noticed the taste. It was disgusting. The closest thing I can compare it to would be moldy onions soaked in some kind of copper tasting liquid. It was bitter and rotten, but there was also something metallic about it. The taste covered my entire tongue and seemed to coat the inside of my mouth. I rubbed my tongue against my teeth. It wouldn't go away. I reached toward the bottle of water beside my bed, but before I could grab it, I heard something. Click, I stopped moving. Click, click, the little fan on my end table was slowing down. Normally, I slept with it running all night. I liked the noise. The steady hum helped drown out the small sounds the house made after everyone went to sleep. But now, the blades were losing speed. With every rotation, the fan made a strange clocking sound. Click, the blades turned. Click, a little slower. Click, slower again. Something about that sound made my brain feel like it was skipping along with it. I found myself staring at the fan, unable to look away. Each rotation seemed to take longer than the last. The room became quieter. Click, the blades struggled through another turn. Click, then another, until finally the fan crawled to a complete stop. The silence that followed felt enormous. I stared at it for a few seconds. Then I shook my head, trying to pull myself out of the strange daze that had come over me. My eyes immediately moved toward the doorway. The same doorway. The same place where I had seen the figure standing the previous night. Just thinking about it made my stomach tighten. I remembered seeing that shape in the darkness. I remembered watching it stand there before it seemed to disperse over me. Even now, I don't know exactly how to describe what happened. It hadn't walked toward me. It hadn't jumped onto the bed. It hadn't moved the way a person would move. It had simply seemed to spread. Like smoke. Like darkness becoming liquid. And then, it had been over me. That memory should have made me terrified of the doorway, but strangely, when I looked there now, I didn't see anything. The doorway was empty. The hall beyond it was dark. Nothing moved. Still, I couldn't relax, because I could feel something. That feeling from the previous night had returned. Actually, that wasn't completely true. It didn't feel like it had returned. It felt like it had never left. That realization frightened me more than seeing the figure again would have. I had the overwhelming sense that whatever had been in my doorway was still somewhere nearby. It had simply moved to another part of the room, somewhere I couldn't see. I looked toward the corners. Nothing. I looked at the closet. Nothing. I looked underneath the desk. Nothing. But the feeling remained. It was almost as if the thing had somehow hidden itself inside the room, not behind the furniture. Not underneath the bed, inside the room itself. I imagined it hiding beneath the paint on the walls, pressed flat against the drywall. listening, waiting, memorizing me. The rhythm of my heartbeat, the sound of my breathing, the little movements I made when I thought I was alone. That thought made my skin crawl. I pulled the blanket closer to myself. The horrible taste was still coating my mouth, and the nausea was becoming harder to ignore. I knew I needed to get up. I had to use the bathroom anyway. For several minutes, I argued with myself. I didn't want to leave the bed. The bathroom wasn't far from my room, but getting there meant stepping through the doorway. The same doorway where I had seen it. Eventually, my bladder won. I pushed the blanket aside and placed my feet on the floor. The room felt colder than I expected. I stood slowly. Nothing happened. I walked toward the door. With every step, I expected something to move. Nothing did. I reached the doorway and stopped. The hallway beyond my room was completely dark. I could hear the house settling around me. Somewhere downstairs, something made a small popping sound. Probably the wood. Probably the pipes. At least, that's what I told myself. I stepped into the hallway, and instantly, something changed. The taste disappeared. Completely, I froze. My tongue moved around inside my mouth. Nothing. No rotten onions. No copper. No bitterness. Nothing at all. My mouth tasted normal. I stood there for a moment, confused. Then I looked back into my bedroom. It was dark and quiet. The fan remained motionless on the end table. I wanted to test something. I leaned backward slightly, putting my head through the doorway. For a second, I thought I could taste something again. I pulled back. Gone, my stomach dropped. I didn't want to keep testing it. I hurried to the bathroom, turned on the light, and shut the door behind me. Standing there under the bright bathroom light made me feel stupid. Everything looked normal. The mirror, the sink, the towels, my own tired face staring back at me. I looked pale. There were dark circles under my eyes, and my hair was sticking up in different directions. I opened my mouth and looked at my tongue. Nothing seemed wrong with it. No blood, no swelling, nothing that could explain the metallic, rotten taste. I washed my mouth out with water anyway. Then I stood there longer than necessary because I didn't want to go back to my bedroom. Eventually, I knew I couldn't stay in the bathroom all night. I turned off the light and stepped into the hallway. Everything was still quiet. I walked back toward my room. The closer I got, the more uncomfortable I became. Then I stepped through the bedroom doorway. The smell hit me immediately. I stopped so quickly that I almost stumbled backward. It was horrible, heavy, rotten. The entire bedroom suddenly smelled like something had died inside it. I covered my nose with my shirt. The smell reminded me of something from years earlier when my stepdad had noticed a terrible odor around the house. He eventually tracked it down to a dead possum underneath our crawl space. I remembered how the smell had seemed to get into everything. That same thick, sickening odor now filled my bedroom. Except there was no dead animal in here. At least there shouldn't have been. I stepped backward into the hallway. The smell weakened. I stepped into the room again. It became overwhelming. My heart started pounding. There was something wrong with my bedroom. I knew it now. This wasn't just me waking from a nightmare. I wasn't imagining a shadow because I was half asleep. Something was happening inside that room. I reached for the light switch and flipped it on. The room filled with light. For some reason, the smell seemed to weaken almost immediately. That terrified me. Smells aren't supposed to care whether the lights are on. I stood there, staring around the room. Everything looked exactly the way I had left it. My clothes were where they belonged. The bed was messy from where I'd been sleeping. Nothing was hiding in the corners. Nothing was standing in the doorway. I checked underneath the bed. Nothing. I checked the closet. Nothing. Still, a faint trace of that smell remained. I walked over to the window and opened it. Cold night air came into the room. Within a few minutes, the odor had mostly disappeared. I stood beside the open window, breathing slowly. I didn't know what else to do. Going downstairs and waking my mom or stepdad felt ridiculous. What was I supposed to say? Something made my fan stop and now my room smells like a dead possum? Even saying it inside my head made it sound stupid. So I did the only thing I could think of. I put my earbuds in. I played something loud enough to block out the house. Then I climbed back into bed with the light still on. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment I was lying there staring toward the doorway, and the next thing I knew, sunlight was shining directly into my eyes. Morning. For a few seconds, I just lay there. Everything looked normal. The sunlight coming through the window made the room seem completely harmless. There was no rotten smell, no strange taste. The fan sat quietly on the table. It was almost impossible to believe anything had happened. Then I moved. My shirt was soaked with sweat. I touched my chest and felt the damp fabric sticking to my skin. The pillowcase was wet, too. I sat up slowly. My entire body felt exhausted, like I hadn't slept at all. I looked around the room again. Nothing. Whatever had happened during the night seemed far away now. Almost unreal. I changed my shirt quickly and headed downstairs. As soon as I reached the kitchen, the smell of breakfast greeted me. My mom was cooking. Eggs were frying on the stove, and coffee was brewing nearby. Normally that smell would have made me hungry. Instead, the scent of the coffee triggered something in my mind. The bedroom, the rotten smell, the dead possum. I stopped in the kitchen doorway. It was strange because until that exact moment, I had almost forgotten what happened. Not ignored it. Forgotten it. The memory hadn't completely disappeared, but it had somehow become difficult to reach. Like a dream you remember immediately after waking, but lose piece by piece as the morning goes on. I stood there trying to reconstruct the night. The nausea, the taste, the fan, the doorway, the smell. It had all happened only a few hours earlier. So why did it feel like something from weeks ago? I wanted to tell my mom. I wanted to explain everything. Maybe I needed someone else to tell me it was strange. Maybe I needed her to come upstairs and look around the room. But before I could say anything, she started singing. Unchained Melody. She stood in front of the stove, cooking eggs and quietly singing to herself as if it were any other morning. There was something comforting about how normal she seemed, but there was also something deeply unsettling about it. She had no idea what had happened upstairs, or at least she acted like she didn't. She moved around the kitchen, humming and singing, completely relaxed. Meanwhile, I stood there thinking about something hiding inside the walls of my bedroom, something that had been tormenting me while everyone else slept. I wondered how she could be so normal. How could the house feel so ordinary to everyone else? Sunlight came through the kitchen windows. Coffee brewed, eggs cooked. My mom sang. And upstairs, my bedroom waited for me. The contrast made everything worse. I sat down and pulled out my phone. I started texting Maggie. Even while I typed, I struggled to explain exactly what had happened. Every time I tried to remember the details, they seemed to move farther away from me. That bothered me. Memories aren't supposed to disappear that quickly. If something terrifying happened to you only a few hours ago, you should remember it clearly. But this didn't feel like a normal memory. It felt buried. I had to dig for each piece. The harder I tried, the more it reminded me of trying to remember a nightmare after waking. You know something happened. You know it frightened you. You can still feel the fear in your body. But the details refuse to stay still. I was still texting Maggie when my stepdad walked into the kitchen. The second I saw him, another memory came back to me, what he had thrown away. I stopped typing. For a moment, I watched him move through the kitchen. Then I put my phone down. I wasn't sure how to ask him. Part of me didn't even want to. But something in his behavior had been bothering me since the beginning. I looked at him and lowered my voice. Did you really throw it out? My voice sounded strange, flat, almost emotionless. My stepdad didn't look at me. That was the first thing I noticed. He had definitely heard the question. I knew he had. But instead of answering immediately, he continued doing whatever he had been doing. For only a second or two, there was silence. It wasn't a long pause, but it was long enough for me to notice, long enough for me to understand that he was thinking about his answer. People always imagine fear as screaming or running. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes fear is silence. Sometimes it's hesitation. Sometimes someone asks you a question and you already know the answer, but your brain freezes because you're trying to decide how much of the truth you should admit. Finally, he spoke. It's gone. The answer came too quickly, too cleanly, like he'd already practiced saying it. It's gone. Not, yeah, I threw it away. Not, of course I did. Just those two words. It's gone. Then he turned away from me. Almost immediately, he started talking to my mom about something else. The conversation changed so quickly that it felt deliberate. I sat there staring at him. He didn't look back. My mom continued cooking. The smell of eggs and coffee filled the kitchen. Everything around me was ordinary. But I knew something wasn't right. I could feel it in the way he'd answered. I could see it in the way he avoided looking at me. Maybe I couldn't remember every detail of what had happened during the night. Maybe whatever was happening inside my bedroom was somehow making those memories harder to hold on to. But I knew one thing clearly. My stepdad wasn't telling me everything. And I had the growing feeling that my mom wasn't either. There was something they were keeping from me. Something connected to what he claimed he'd thrown away. Something connected to the figure in my doorway, to the horrible taste in my mouth, to the fan slowly dying beside my bed, to that smell of death filling the room. I looked toward the ceiling. My bedroom was directly above us. For the first time that morning, I wondered if whatever had been inside my room was still there. Maybe it hadn't disappeared when the sun came up. Maybe it was simply quiet, waiting inside the walls, listening to us talk. And whatever my stepdad knew about it, he wasn't ready to tell me yet. My grandmother died 3 weeks ago. She died on a Tuesday morning, quietly, in a hospital room overlooking a parking lot instead of the river she had spent most of her life beside. By Friday, I was standing alone inside her house, wondering why she had insisted that I be the one to clean it out. My grandmother had lived near the Snake River, not far from Massacre Rocks, for more than 60 years. Everyone in the area knew her. Not because she was especially social, but because she had one habit that people found strange enough to remember. She carved toys from driftwood. Little horses, tiny boats, dolls, birds, sometimes animals I couldn't even recognize. Then, once every month, she carried them down toward the river and left them somewhere along the bank. People joked about it. If we were in town and someone saw her buying carving tools or sandpaper, they would smile and ask whether she was making more presents for the ghosts. She's feeding the river children again, someone once joked when I was little. My grandmother heard him. She didn't laugh. She didn't get angry either. She simply kept walking. Growing up, I asked her about the toys more times than I can remember. Why do you keep making them? They're gifts. For who? She would always smile without looking directly at me. For the children who never went home. As a child, I knew exactly what she meant. The water babies. Almost every kid around that part of Idaho had heard some version of the story. Depending on who told it, the details changed. Some people said infants had been drowned in the Snake River many generations ago. Others claimed children from native families had died during some forgotten tragedy, and their spirits remained in the water. Some versions said the crying belonged to babies abandoned during migration. Other stories barely explained them at all. But every version shared one warning. If you heard children crying near the river at night, don't go looking for them, especially if they called your name. I never believed those stories. Not really. They were the kind of local legend adults told children to keep them away from dangerous water after dark. My grandmother, however, treated the stories like instructions. She never whistled near the Snake River. Not once. If someone else did, she would immediately tell them to stop. She refused to remain near the water after sunset. And once every month, no matter the weather, she disappeared for almost exactly 1 hour, carrying a basket filled with handmade toys. When she returned, the basket was empty. I always thought it was simply one of her strange traditions. After she died, I discovered how wrong I was. Her house hadn't changed much since I was a child. Same furniture, same yellow curtains, same old clock in the kitchen that always ran about 6 minutes slow. There were photographs everywhere. Some showed my father when he was young. Some showed me as a child. A few were so old that I didn't recognize anyone in them. The entire place smelled like dust, cedar, and the lavender soap my grandmother had used for as long as I could remember. My parents lived in another state now. My father offered to come help, but according to the attorney handling my grandmother's estate, she had specifically requested that I be the first family member to sort through the house. Nobody seemed to know why. I didn't think much of it. Grandma and I had always been close. Maybe she trusted me not to throw away important things. That was what I told myself. By late afternoon, I had already filled several boxes. Clothes for donation, kitchenware, old books, photographs I wanted to keep. Then, I started moving her bedroom dresser. It was heavier than expected. I pulled one side away from the wall, and one of the floorboards beneath it shifted. I almost ignored it. The house was old. Half the floorboards made some kind of sound, but this one actually lifted slightly. I knelt and pressed one end. The opposite side rose. There was a narrow hollow space underneath. Inside sat a metal box. I remember thinking I had discovered jewelry or money. Instead, the box contained journals, 24 of them, all leather-bound, different sizes, different levels of wear. Some looked almost new. Others were cracked and faded. The oldest one was dated 1973. The most recent ended only 3 days before my grandmother died. I sat on the floor. Then I opened the first journal. The very first page had been written in her handwriting. I recognized it instantly. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. The toys in the shed must be taken to the river before the next new moon. If you fail, they'll begin crying again. Don't let them finish. I stared at the page, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because I didn't know what else to do. My grandmother had been 88 when she died. People become strange when they get old. Maybe this was some superstition she had carried for too long. Maybe dementia had started affecting her without anyone noticing. I almost closed the journal. Then, curiosity won. The next page wasn't a story. It was a record. January 1974. 3 wooden horses, No crying afterward. February 1974. One doll, one carved duck. The smallest one followed me halfway home. Ignored it. Everything stayed quiet. I frowned. March, April, May, every month had an entry. Some were simple. 2 horses, 1 boat, no activity. Others were longer. Heard crying from the north bank. Did not answer. 1 toy missing from basket when I reached the river. Returned home immediately. Footprints outside kitchen at sunrise. No further activity. The journals continued like that for decades. Every month, every offering, every strange sound, every mistake, every rule. And one sentence appeared more often than anything else. Never answer when they know your name. I read until sunset. At some point, I realized I was taking the journals seriously, not believing them, but reading them like they were an instruction manual. One entry described hearing a baby crying under the porch. Another mentioned wet handprints appearing on the inside of the kitchen window. One claimed something followed my grandmother home for 3 nights after she forgot to leave a toy boat. There were rules scattered throughout the journals. Do not count the children. Do not follow laughter upstream. If a toy is returned, burn it before sunrise. If you hear splashing behind you, keep walking. Never look beneath the water when they ask you to. And always, never answer when they know your name. Eventually, I put the journals aside. I needed air. That was when I remembered the shed. My grandmother kept a small wooden shed behind the house. As a child, I wasn't allowed inside without her. She used it for carving. I found the key hanging exactly where it had always been, beneath a little ceramic fish near the back door. The shed smelled strongly of wood shavings. Tools covered one wall. Knives, files, small saws. Sandpaper there were unfinished pieces of driftwood everywhere. Then I noticed the shelves. Hundreds of toys. Not finished toys. Half-finished ones. Tiny horses missing legs. Dolls without faces. Boats that hadn't been sanded. Each one had a small paper tag tied around it. Month, year, the dates went back farther than I expected. Some toys had clearly been prepared years ahead of time. My grandmother had planned for this, or thought she had. I followed the shelves from left to right. The dates became more recent. Then suddenly they stopped. 6 weeks before her death. The final tag hung from the neck of an unfinished wooden horse. July. Daniel. My name. I stared at it for a long time. There were plenty of normal explanations. She knew she was sick. Maybe she expected me to take over. Maybe she labeled the toy because she wanted me to finish it. That made sense. I kept repeating that. Daniel means she wanted me to finish the July horse. Nothing else. I left the shed and went back inside. That evening, I carried several journals onto the porch with a beer. The Snake River was about half a mile away, hidden beyond trees and uneven ground, but on quiet evenings I could hear it. The sky was turning orange. Birds moved between the cottonwoods. Everything felt peaceful. Then the birds stopped. Every single one. No final call. No gradual fading. 1 second they were there. The next, nothing, I lowered the journal. The silence became so complete that the distant river sounded much louder than usual. I could hear water moving around rocks. I could hear my own breathing. Then I heard a child crying, very faint, somewhere beyond the trees. I sat completely still. The cry came again, a toddler, maybe 2 or 3 years old. Then another voice joined, a baby, then another. Within seconds, there were dozens. Children crying together. Some sounded close, others distant. Some were screaming, others only whimpering. My hands went cold. I told myself someone was playing a recording. Maybe kids were down near the river. Maybe the sound carried strangely. Anything, I grabbed a flashlight. Then, without really thinking about it, I started walking toward the river. Halfway there, I realized how stupid that was. But by then, the crying had become quieter, almost as if the children were moving away. I continued. The last daylight was disappearing when I reached the bank. The Snake River looked calm, nothing unusual, no children, no movement. The crying had stopped completely. I stood there feeling ridiculous. Then I laughed quietly. Jesus, Grandma, someone giggled behind me. A little girl, close enough that it sounded like she was standing directly behind my shoulder. I spun around. Nobody. I raised the flashlight. Sagebrush, cottonwoods, rocks, empty ground. Then, from across the water, a girl's voice said, "Daniel." My body went cold. I didn't answer. The journals slipped slightly under my arm. One fell. It landed open on the dirt. My flashlight moved across the page. There, in my grandmother's handwriting, was a sentence I had read earlier. They always say your name first. Something splashed in the river. I looked toward it automatically. Nothing. Then another splash. Closer, not like a fish jumping, like a bare foot stepping into shallow water. Splash, pause, splash. The little girl's voice came again. Daniel, this time, there was something different in her tone. Impatience. The journal had another rule. If they called twice, leave, I started backing away. Then I remembered the next line. If they call 3 times, don't look in the water. My heel caught against a rock. I fell backward. The flashlight flew from my hand. It hit the ground, rolled, and stopped with the beam facing the riverbank. I saw footprints. Tiny ones. Dozens, no, hundreds, they led from the water. Each footprint was smaller than my palm. Bare feet. Wet, fresh, they hadn't been there when I arrived. Every trail pointed toward me. Then, the crying began again. But it wasn't coming from the river anymore. It surrounded me. From the bushes. Behind trees. From the darkness outside the flashlight beam. Children crying from every direction. I didn't wait for them to say my name a third time. I ran. I left the flashlight. I almost left one of the journals too, but somehow I grabbed it while getting up. Branches struck my arms and face. I could hear movement behind me. Tiny footsteps. Fast, splashing through water even though there were no puddles along the path. I never looked back. I reached my grandmother's house, ran inside, slammed the door, locked it. The crying stopped immediately, not gradually. Instantly, I stood with my back against the door for several minutes. My chest hurt from breathing. I listened. Nothing. I checked every window. Nothing. Eventually, I turned on every light in the house and stayed awake until sunrise. By morning, I had mostly convinced myself there had been some reasonable explanation. Grief, stress, exhaustion. Too much beer on an empty stomach. A lifetime of hearing water baby stories. My brain had taken all of it and created something terrifying. That was the explanation I chose. I started packing my car. I wanted to leave. Before I did, I decided the journals should be destroyed. I couldn't explain why. Maybe I thought burning them would stop me from obsessing over my grandmother's delusions. I carried several outside. Then, I stopped. A basket sat beside the porch. My grandmother's basket, the one she used for the toys. It had not been there the day before. I was certain of that. Inside sat a single wooden horse. Unfinished, the same one from the shed. July, Daniel. A note had been tied around its neck. My grandmother's handwriting. 2 words. You answered. I read it again. Then again. No, I didn't. I said that aloud. I hadn't answered the girl. She called my name twice. I had stayed silent. Then I remembered falling. Seeing the footprints. Hearing the crying around me. And I remembered what I whispered before running. Oh, God, 1 word. Oh, not an answer. Not really. But apparently the children didn't care about intention. Sound was enough. I left the journals, I got in my car, and I drove home. I live several hours away. An apartment building in a completely normal neighborhood. No river nearby. No wilderness behind the building. Nothing that should have connected me to my grandmother's property. The first night home, around sunset, I heard a child crying outside. I ignored it. The second night, it happened again. This time, beneath my bedroom window, I'm on the third floor. The third night, I found wet footprints in the hallway outside my apartment. Small, bare, they stopped at my door. Yesterday, they were inside. 3 prints, on the kitchen floor, leading toward the bedroom. I called my landlord. He thought maybe someone had brought a child inside with wet feet. I asked how they got through my locked apartment. He laughed nervously. I didn't. I've been reading the journals constantly now. I should have read all of them before leaving Idaho. The rules change after someone answers. My grandmother wrote about it. Not often. Apparently, she answered once when she was young, before the journals began. That's why she spent 50 years making the offerings. She wasn't protecting the town. She was protecting herself. And eventually, me, one entry from 1973 says, they don't want toys. They want attention. The toys only convince them they already have yours. Another, never stop carving completely. They grow restless when they think they have been forgotten. Then I found an entry from 1981 that made me feel sick. A child followed her home. Not physically. At first, she heard crying near the house. Then wet footprints. Then, toys moved by themselves. Exactly what I'm experiencing. My grandmother managed to stop it by carving a horse and leaving it near the river before the new moon. That should have made me feel hopeful. It didn't. Because there was another sentence underneath. One offering will satisfy a single child. If several follow, you must identify how many before they reach your bed. Remember another rule? Do not count the children. Apparently there are situations where every available choice is wrong. The footsteps are multiplying. Last night, I found 9, I think. I tried not to count them. But once your brain notices a pattern, counting happens automatically. 1, 2, 3, 4, I stopped myself. Then started again. I have no idea whether knowing the number made things worse. I hope not. 2 nights ago, I woke around 3 a.m. Something was sitting at the end of my bed. I couldn't see it clearly. The room was dark. It was small, child-sized. I could hear wet breathing. Then it asked, "Do you remember me?" I didn't answer. The figure stayed there for almost an hour. At sunrise, it disappeared. The blanket near my feet was soaked. Yesterday, I started carving. I've never carved anything before. At least, I hadn't. I bought a small block of wood and some cheap tools. I watched a tutorial online. Then I started. My hands already knew what to do. That is not an exaggeration. The first cut felt awkward. The second, less so. Within 10 minutes, I stopped thinking about technique. The knife moved naturally. Cut, turn, scrape, smooth, I carved a horse. Almost identical to the ones my grandmother made. I should have felt proud. Instead, I cried. Because this was apparently the inheritance she had actually left me. Not the house, not money, not the journals, a job. Keep the water babies quiet. I finished the horse tonight. When I turned it over, words had been carved into the underside. I did not carve them. August, 1 horse. Too late. I dropped it. Then the crying began outside. Not one child. Dozens. My apartment walls seem thinner tonight. I can hear water. That shouldn't be possible. There is no river anywhere near me. But I can hear current moving somewhere beneath the floor. A few minutes ago, water started coming from beneath my bedroom door. Not flooding, just a thin layer, enough to wet the carpet. Tiny footprints appeared one after another. No feet making them, just impressions forming in the wet carpet. Coming toward me. I opened another journal. The final one. The entry from 3 days before Grandma died. I hadn't read it carefully until now. Daniel will come after me. He will believe the toys are for them. They are not. The toys are markers. Every one I leave at the river gives them something other than a name to carry. For 50 years, I have been trading pieces of wood for pieces of memory. When they take a horse, they forget a face. When they take a doll, they forget a voice. When they take a boat, they forget the path home. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. The next paragraph was worse. But forgetting is temporary. They always remember eventually. And when they do, they return for the person whose name replaced the offering. I thought about the tag. July. Daniel. My grandmother hadn't prepared the horse for me to carve. She had carved it because she knew she was dying. She had been preparing to give them my name. Or maybe to hide it. I kept reading. There is one thing I never told Daniel. He thinks the water babies are dead children. They are not children. They learned crying because crying makes people come closer. They learned names because names make people answer. They learned toys because humans trust things made for children. They have no children of their own. They have no young. They only imitate. My stomach turned. Another splash came from beneath the floor. Then a little girl's voice whispered from the hallway. Daniel, I covered my mouth. Second call. Daniel. I stared at the bedroom door. Something scratched against the other side. The journal continued. If they follow him away from the river, the old offerings have failed. He must not bring them back. He must not return to the Snake River. That surprised me. I had already been planning to drive back tomorrow. Apparently, that would be the worst possible thing I could do. Then, I reached the last paragraph my grandmother ever wrote. If Daniel answers, there is only one way left. He must finish the final toy. Not a horse, not a doll, not a boat. He must carve himself. Give them a version of him that can be taken instead. Make it complete. Face, hands, eyes, name do not make the mouth. If the carving has a mouth, they will teach it to answer. The crying stopped. I'm sitting at my desk right now. The unfinished wooden horse is beside me. I've brought every piece of wood I own into the room. I'm going to try. I don't know whether I can carve a person, but my hands already seem to understand. I've started with the head. The knife moves almost by itself. The shape looks like me, more than it should. Same jaw, same nose, same uneven hairline. I've carved the eyes. Hands, fingers. I'm writing this during breaks because I'm afraid I might forget what I'm doing if I stop recording it somehow. There are small, wet handprints appearing on the outside of my bedroom door. They are higher than they should be. Some are near the top. Maybe they're climbing. The figure is almost finished. I haven't carved a mouth. I won't. I'm about to carve my name into its back. Daniel, my grandmother's journal says that once it is complete, I need to leave it outside the bedroom door and turn off every light. Then I have to stay completely silent until sunrise. Whatever I hear, whatever voice speaks, whatever it promises, do not answer. Especially if it sounds like Grandma. That last part seems strangely specific. I understand why now. Someone just spoke from the hallway. My grandmother's voice. Perfect, Daniel, sweetheart. I haven't heard her call me sweetheart since I was 12. Open the door. I'm crying. I know it isn't her. I know. But the voice is exact. It's okay. You did enough. The scratching stopped. Bring me the little man. I carved my name. The figure is complete. No mouth. I'm going to put it outside. If this works, I'll update this tomorrow. If it doesn't, then maybe someone else will find these posts someday. If you live around Massacre Rocks and you find wooden toys beside the Snake River, leave them alone. Don't collect them. Don't give them to your children. Don't throw them into the water. And if you hear a child crying from the river after sunset, keep walking, even if it sounds hurt, even if it says it's lost, even if it knows your name, especially if it knows your name. I opened the bedroom door just enough to place the carving outside. The hallway was empty, but the carpet was completely wet. I set the little wooden version of myself on the floor, then closed the door. The moment the latch clicked, the crying began. Hundreds of voices, maybe more. Then tiny feet rushed down the hallway. They stopped outside my room. Everything became silent. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard something pick up the carving. A little girl giggled. Another child whispered, "Daniel." I stayed silent. Another voice, "Daniel." Still silent. Then a third voice said, "This one doesn't have a mouth." Something scratched the wood. Another child laughed. "Give him one." I don't know what that means. I don't want to know. There are carving sounds outside my bedroom now. Slow, careful, the exact sound my knife made against wood. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I can hear them working on the little figure. The journal didn't say anything about this. It only said not to give it a mouth. I didn't. They are doing it themselves. The scratching just stopped. Someone placed something against the bottom of my bedroom door. I can see the shadow. Small, human-shaped. Then, from the hallway, I heard my own voice. "Daniel?" I haven't answered. My own voice laughed. And then it said, "Now I can."